Hey, welcome everyone back to the Data Ideas Podcast. This is Dustin, your host, and I am super excited to be joined by Helen McKenzie today. Thanks so much, Helen, for joining from the UK. We were able to find a time that worked for both of us, so appreciate that. Would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. I've been a fan of this podcast and yourself for a little while, so this is brilliant for me. So my name is Helen McKenzie, and I am a geospatial advocate at CARTO. So CARTO is a data and software location intelligence platform, which means we help people solve their location problems. And my role there is geospatial advocate, which basically we say my unofficial title is CARTO's hype person. I'm basically here to get people really excited about maps and really think about why they should be considering location and geospatial in their analytics. So yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure. No, that's really cool. I was really excited about this because I was telling you before we started recording that I love maps. And one thing that I really like about maps, particularly I've been more of like a front end analytics professional in organizations. And one thing I've noticed is that when you take a raw set of data, or, maybe it's a spreadsheet or something you've been looking at for a long time that folks are used to looking at, and it has location information attached to whatever you've been looking at. When you put that into a map, and I feel like oftentimes it hasn't, a lot of stuff hasn't been put into a map, before, but when it does, people's eyes just light up and it's like it means something totally different to them. Has that been your experience too?
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. I think it's funny to say that so many times when I'm at events and sort of standing in front of like loads of posters of maps and things like that, so many people come up to me just like, I love maps. Like, I'm not sure who you are or what you do, but please can you
Right.
tell me more about this? There's something about them as a data visualization tool that is quite special and quite different. I'm going to throw a fact in here straight away. The oldest
Cool.
known map in the world is about 25,000 years old.
Oh my
It's
gosh, I didn't know
a
that.
map of the Czech Republic carved onto a mammoth tusk. And there's just something I think so um, innate within all of us that loves to see the world and represent the world around us spatially. And clearly, we've been doing it for 25,000 years. So it's something that really appeals to everyone and is really engages everyone. I think that's what makes it such a special kind of data visualization, that lots of charts and diagrams don't have that sort of almost personal appeal.
Right. So this is a fun example here. So there's a 25,000-year-old map from
Yeah,
it's of the Czech Republic, you
it's
said?
of a small region in the Czech Republic. It's a
Okay.
carving on a mammoth tusk. I think you can go and see it. It's going to be a
Okay.
pilgrimage I'll make one day.
So you can actually go see it in person?
I think it's in a museum. Yeah.
Oh, really? Cool. Okay.
hmm
What should people search for if they want to see it? Is it something that there's like pictures of, or
I'll have to look that up, and maybe you could put it in the show notes. But if you
we'll
just
do
Google
that?
oldest map in the world, that
Okay.
you'll get maybe a list. There's always like these BuzzFeed articles and things like that saying what are the oldest
Okay.
maps in the world, and that's the number one.
Yeah, that sounds like something that's gone viral at some point.
Yes, yes. Probably just me looking at it like 5 times a day.
Well, we'll put it in the show notes, and if it hasn't already, maybe it will now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we'll put the link to it when we find that in the show notes. Very cool. I love that example, and I mean, talk about withstanding the test of time, right? In terms of drawing people's interest in.
Yeah, exactly. As relevant back then as it is today.
Super cool. So you were just at a large conference in your industry, the Spatial Data Science Conference, I believe it was. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's right. Yeah, over
Yeah.
in New York.
Where was it?
In New York.
In New York. Okay.
Yes.
It looked like I saw some of the pictures that were posted. It looks like it was a pretty awesome time. What were kind of the highlights of that event? What did you like about it? And what did you present on there? I think you were a presenter too, right?
Yeah, I was. So
Yeah.
it was an absolutely fantastic event. I think I'm based in London. I think I'm still a little bit jet lagged
Yeah.
from the event, but I'm powering through, drinking lots of coffee, having lots of sleep. So hopefully soon I will start feeling normal again.
Yeah.
But yes, I was one of the presenters. So it's a 2-day conference, and like lots of conferences in the data science, data analytics world, we have one day that's kind of speakers and presenters doing sort of lightning talks and panels about all the latest advancements in spatial data science. And then we have a day before, which is sort of technical workshops and basically classes and practicals and how to. And that's what I was involved in. So we had, I think, about 4 different events happening across New York City. And I was at an event at the Google office, which was amazing. And I was presenting on CARTO, which is the company I work for, and also a sort of introduction on how to use SQL. For people who were there who weren't familiar. And we were showing, myself and my colleague Miguel, who's our lead data scientist, was showing some of the CARTO tools that are specific to retail, because that's what a lot of our customers are really interested in. But there were so many fantastic talks and panels at the events. Lots of people were talking about sustainability was a really key area, and also the democratization of analysis. So at CARTO, for a long time, a lot of our tools have been SQL-based and Python-based, and we're starting to move into also having a no-code, low-code option for people who don't sort of know or want to do coding, which I think is really fantastic. It just opens up these amazing tools for so many people. So yeah, we're talking a lot about democratization. What else came up? Oh, there was a really big discussion about sort of the future of the GIS analyst. So geographic information systems is sort of the umbrella term for a lot of the industry that I'm in. And there was a huge discussion about what the future of that looks like as the industry changes and advances so quickly. How can people sort of keep their skills relevant? What will they be doing in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? So it's always fantastic to get all these people together. Like, I think there's about 400, 500 people together, because it's been such a long time. And I feel you can't really talk about events these days without talking about COVID. I mean, it's just something that everyone, you speak to someone for 5 minutes and people just start saying, it's so great to be in a room with people again. And it's such a good point, even though we've been sort of recovering from COVID for quite a long time and events have been on for maybe the last year or so. With the virtual events that people are having for such a long time, you're really missing that sort of social, spontaneous networking side. So getting back to an in-person event, especially one so big, was fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah, it's I think, I always loved conferences, but we truly didn't know what we had until it was gone with that. And it's even when I see photos, that people have been posting from the latest conferences that are now back in person, it's just kind of like, it makes me want to go back to it. I can't wait to get into it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really lucky in my role that I get to go to loads of events, because I'm quite often speaking at conferences, quite often holding workshops, or sometimes I'll just be standing at a stand talking to people coming past. So I'm really lucky that I get to go to loads of those things, and I have been for a while. And I still go to a lot of virtual events, which is fantastic, but they're very different. I think virtual events tend to be really good at sort of education and learning, but yeah, you're sort of missing that networking social side that I think is fantastic to have back.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to get into some of the things you were talking about that the conference was touching on. So, the intersection of geospatial and modern analytics, and then also to the future, of mapping and GIS. Want to talk about those a little bit later and get your thoughts on those things, because I'm super intrigued by that. Just knowing the power that mapping capabilities have with modern analytics tools, and how that can be super transformative for teams in companies. But I do want to, we've talked about some fun stuff here to kick this off. We talked about the 25,000-year-old map. We talked about some of the history. We talked about this cool conference that's out there. And I'll link to that conference, by the way, in the show notes as well, so folks can check that out. As you were talking, I'm like, gosh, this sounds like something I might like to look at too. But what so you work for CARTO. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned how you get to go to these events, and you love the role that you have, and you feel fortunate to be able to do this. Tell us a little bit about the company you work for and what you do for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So CARTO, we define ourselves as a location intelligence platform. So we basically are a browser-based spatial analytics platform. So people can use our platform to do loads of spatial analysis, visualize huge data. We've also a data provider. So we've got a spatial data catalog that has about, I think now 12,000 data sets on it that our customers can access, that range from sort of human mobility data, like footfall data, financial spend data, demographics data. There's so much exciting stuff on there. Part of my job is I get to create visualizations analysis with all of that stuff, which I absolutely love. And the sort of thing about CARTO, I think, that sets us apart from quite a lot of location intelligence platforms, because there's quite a few out there, is that we're fully cloud native. So people who have, for example, a Google Cloud data warehouse or Snowflake or Databricks or Redshift can connect directly from CARTO into their data warehouses and do all of this analysis directly within their data warehouse, keep it all in the cloud, keep it all in your browser, no local files. When I first joined CARTO and was playing around with this, I just couldn't believe how quick and easy all of this stuff was compared to being I came from much more sort of desktop software background and having all your data saved maybe locally on a server, and it's just wildly different. It's fantastic. And my role at CARTO is quite different to what I've done previously. So I come from a sort of consulting background
Sure.
in infrastructure and transport and things like that. And now I'm in CARTO's marketing team, which is fantastic. And it's quite a change of pace for me, but I absolutely love it. So my role is kind of a mixture of things. It's a lot of technical content creation. So I do a lot of blogging. I do a lot of creating reports. I also do, if you go on the CARTO website, quite a lot of the maps that you'll see there will be things that I've created, creating sort of demos and things to sort of hook people in and realize the sort of potential of CARTO. And I think that's kind of what the advocacy role that I have is all about, is about getting people excited and thinking about what they could be using CARTO for. So it's amazing. I still can't believe I'm doing it sometimes.
Yeah. I find all of this really interesting. I know that you have some of these examples you mentioned of some of the work you've done on your LinkedIn profile, but you mentioned some of it's featured on the CARTO website as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you go on particularly the CARTO blog, quite a lot of what you'll see on there is things that I've created. I guess a lot of it is about thinking about what are our customers trying to do, what problems are they trying to solve, and sort of showing them how they can do it, showing them how they can do it easier, more quickly. And it's really exciting. And I also get to do some really fun stuff, which is amazing. Quite a lot of stuff around like retail, for example, helping people understand where they might want to place their store. But sometimes we do things that are a bit more funky and quirky, just to sort of get people's attention. So recently I did, I'm not sure if you're aware of the Eurovision Song Contest, but it's a really big global song contest. I bet you didn't think this conversation was going to take that turn. It's a really big song contest that takes place in different countries across Europe every year. And next year it's supposed to take place in the UK. So we use CARTO to get very exciting. We are all very excited about it. So I did a blog that basically showed people how they could use CARTO to choose the optimum venue for the Eurovision Song Contest. So sometimes we get to do fun, quirky things like that as well, just to get people's attention.
That's cool. That's awesome. I was just looking at too. I did pull up the CARTO blog as you were talking, and I'll just show. So those listening on the podcast won't be able to see this, but I'm just going to share my screen quick for those that are watching.
Just imagine Dustin showing something amazing.
Yes, the recording on YouTube. And also, too, if you're listening and you want to check this out on YouTube, you can go to the Data Ideas YouTube channel and you can see what I'm about to pull up here. But I'll put the link in the show details or show description to this. But you can see on CARTO's blog, it's just carto.com/blog. I see Helen's name popping up quite a bit on here. Is there anyone that's really cool in particular? I'm sure they're all amazing, but anyone I should open up just as a quick example?
Why don't we take a look at the one on the top row in the right, using location intelligence to combat the Great Resignation in logistics. So this is a really good example of my CMO came to me and said, we're having loads of these conversations with logistics companies where they are realizing that it's really hard to hire people at the moment because of this Great Resignation trend that's been happening over the last year. Yep. So they want to start taking into account unemployment into their site selection decisions so that they can say, we want to look for areas where there's areas of high unemployment, and then that's where we might want to site our new distribution center. So it would be easier for us to hire staff. So this blog is basically trying to illustrate how you might be able to do that. So I don't know if you want to scroll down a little bit so we can get to a map.
Oh, wow.
Maybe. Yeah. So we first of all just took a look at where resignation rates were highest in the US across different states. and different industries. And then if you scroll a little bit further down, I think there's a really cool map in here, if I remember rightly. A little bit more. If you're listening, just imagine we're scrolling through some really great content right now.
Oh, wow.
So this is cool. I feel like I'm just blowing my own trumpet here, just saying it's really cool, isn't it? But it's not me, it's CARTO.
No, it is. You heard me say, oh, wow. And that was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that was a natural reaction when I saw this.
You're too kind. So this is basically, I'm going to try and describe this for people who are listening. What we're looking at here is a 3D visualization of unemployment levels across the state of Tennessee. And we've got a sort of 3D visualization of this. So the higher the polygon, the more unemployment there is. And it's using something called H3, which is a spatial index. And what this is basically a global hexagonal grid that covers the whole world. And doing this means that you can basically using H3, means you can visualize data really, really quickly. And it also means you can visualize it dynamically. So what Dustin's doing here is zooming in and out of the map. And as you zoom in, you can see more detail. The hexagons basically get smaller and you can see more detail. And as you zoom out, you start to see more of a big picture.
It's incredible.
And it's so cool, isn't it? H3 is like one of the things I love working with the most. So this is sort of part of the story of saying, these are the areas of unemployment. And then the further we go on with the blog, we say, now we know where people are unemployed. Let's bring in some other bits of information to try and help with site selection. So we want to know, great, these are areas of high unemployment, but where are also areas that are close to motorways or other major highways? Where are areas that are close to rail stations? And then with that, you can start to pinpoint the best locations for a future distribution center.
This is amazing and a super practical example. I really like this. Yeah, it's going to be hard for me not to play with this when
that's part of the problem I have in my job. I think one of my challenges is like to create something and then go on and not just keep on like looking around and fiddling with it and playing with it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's the same for me with so I have never done anything that's 3D. But I've used like Tableau and Power BI and some of the data visualization tools for mapping. And even at that, I mean, it's nothing to this caliber, but it's hard it sucks you in. It's just so you don't know where the next insight is going to be. And that's, I think, super exciting. And also that's part of the value that we bring as analysts to, know how to put things like this together and then extract insight from it. And then, it's up to us to share and articulate that, or just put it in a map that is so interesting like this that folks can't help themselves but go and figure it out on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually kickstarted quite an interesting debate on Twitter a few weeks ago because I sort of posed the hypothesis that the better you are at data visualization, the better your visualization is, the less time someone will spend looking at it. Because, I mean, if that's the case, then they are looking for an answer to a question, they're looking for a problem to solve. And if they go into visualization, they can work that out really quickly, then it's a really good visualization. But then other people came back at me and I was very happy to be challenged, saying, actually, no, there's also real value in creating these visualizations where people do want to explore and take their time on it. And I think it's just really interesting how like both are definitely true. Both are 100% true. It just depends on why you're doing that.
Absolutely. So you shared a cool use case here that's out on the CARTO website. What are some of, just taking a step back, just in general, what are some of your favorite use cases for leveraging this kind of technology?
Yeah, for sure. I think so I mentioned earlier that my background is consulting, and actually the longest job I had before I worked at CARTO was actually a transport consultancy. And I think that's kind of influenced a lot of what I really see interesting as a use case, because I really see the value of transport, how reliant it is on great mapping and great location intelligence, but also how much it ties in together loads and loads of different industries and loads of different needs like housing and service provision. And actually one of my favorite use cases I've seen in a really long time, and lots of different people have done analysis in this area, is around something called the 15-minute city. which is it became really popular during the pandemic. I've mentioned it again. How many times can I mention the pandemic in this podcast?
Yeah. It's come up in others as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's basically the idea that you can access all of the services that you need to go throughout your daily life within a 15-minute walk. So that might be
Ah.
food shops, education, healthcare, all of those sort of things within a 15-minute walk. And it was really, really popular, a really popular concept for a really long time. And one of my colleagues, Simon Wrigley, did some fantastic analysis around it using CARTO, which I thought was fantastic. I actually had done quite a lot of analysis in the area previously at my previous role using QGIS and Excel and a very strenuous, long spreadsheet related process. And then Simon, when I came to CARTO, was showing me this amazing analysis he'd been doing in CARTO that was just so quick and easy because it was all off the cloud and he was just writing SQL. So every time he wanted to tweak his analysis slightly or look at different parameters, he could just change a number, rerun it, and it would be ready in 3 seconds. Whereas my previous process would have been a few hours. I could have made a mistake and have to restart it all again. But it was basically a really amazing visualization showing, again, using H3 cells like we'd looked at before. For each cell, you could basically see which services within that cell you could access within 15 minutes. And then each cell was given a score. So say there were like 5 services, say food, healthcare, education, transport, and a pharmacy. If you could access all 5 of those, you were given a score of 5. If you could access 0, you were given a score of 0, or it was something like that. And then you could visualize that on a map. So all the red areas were areas with a score of 0, and the green areas with a score of 5, sorry. And you could really see the sort of pockets of areas that you couldn't class as a 15-minute city. And those would be areas that you would say, right, we need to add more of these services, or we need to look at implementing better transport or something like that. And I just think it's just such a great way of looking at so many different facets and analyzing so many different things and then displaying it really, really simply and powerfully.
So if I'm thinking about this correctly, the 15-minute city is kind of the aspiration. Like we know that that's really good for everyone if we have that. And then we've got a couple other things going up, opportunities here that, CARTO and GIS makes possible by mapping out, what elements we want to be within the 15-minute walking distance. And the one I would think would be, and I think you were mentioning this, was kind of from a city planning perspective and from a municipality's perspective, you would want to be able to see, to your point, where are there pockets where, someone has access to almost nothing, 0 or very little of these things within 15 minutes. And then, what do we need to do to improve that score there, improve the number of services and offerings there to those folks. And then also I would think from the private sector's perspective, you might take a look at if you're a healthcare organization, and you're looking at this map, you might say, wow, if there's a pocket of all these zeros in the northeast part of the city, this is an area where we can feel pretty confident in making an investment. And so I think of it from both sides, the city planning as well as the, private company side of things. And I don't know if that's how it's being used, but that's how I was trying to connect the dots. Am I thinking about that the right way?
Yeah, you've exactly got it. That's a really great way of summing it up. And I think you mentioned a lot of stakeholders there, like developers, local authorities, healthcare providers, all of these people. And loads of these people would not normally have access to the data, or if they did, it might be in a spreadsheet or a database that they weren't really confident in accessing, let alone analyzing and actually getting insights from. And I think that's where tools like CARTO is so powerful, because you can create these really impactful dashboards and visualizations where someone without necessarily spatial skills or coding skills can go into the dashboard and really drill down to the areas they're interested in, drill down to the services they're interested in, and get really, really actionable insights from them.
So that brings me to another question here that you've mentioned that, anyone can, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, someone can take CARTO, process a huge volume of data, create really insightful visualizations from it. Is it truly anyone that can do this, or should someone have, an analytics background or a formal GIS background, or, kind of what's the profile of the individual that uses CARTO?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We actually have, I would say, a few different profiles of the kind of people who use CARTO, and different people can sort of get different things out of it, like with a lot of
Sure.
software.
Yep.
So we do have some people who have no geospatial or necessarily data skills, or don't necessarily have the resources to be able to do that. And we actually have a sort of, we call them a professional services arm, and they
Sure.
create, we do, it's almost like consultancy,
Yep.
like we create these solutions for them. We
Sure.
also have a lot of users who are maybe spatial data scientists or data analysts, who maybe have SQL skills or Python skills, and it's sort of the spatial part of their skills that they were missing before CARTO. And I think that's what we make really easy, is sort of that transition from having great data skills, great data awareness, but sort of moving into that spatial area. But then we also have almost the opposite. So a lot of GIS users who basically come from a background where all you know is spatial data, a bit like my background, but you're maybe missing the data science part of your skill set. And that's where we have all these tools that they can use really, really easily. And then we also have a lot of developers who use CARTO, so who access our APIs and make their custom apps. So it's sort of, we have a few different user profiles who use it. So yeah.
No, that definitely answers the question. Um, I'm always curious, how can folks get started with it? Because as you're talking here and sharing these examples, I'm like, I've been in the analytics field for a little bit over 10 years, and I'm like, you know what? Um, it's cool to, mapping I've been able to do, but like, I would like to try this. I want to jump in and do some of this stuff. I want to create visuals like this and see what insights I can find. And so I'm wondering, is it even realistic that someone like me without a GIS background or degree or whatever could use it and draw insight from it?
Yeah, I'd say 100%. And that's kind of our mission at CARTO, is opening up location intelligence to people who don't necessarily have this geospatial background. We
Sure.
do have a 2-week trial on CARTO. So anyone
Oh,
can, if
really?
they would like
Okay.
to, yeah, for sure, a free 2-week trial.
Okay.
But anyone can have a go. We also have something called the CARTO Academy, which has loads of resources to help people get started. And they're very sort of use case focused. So they'll be like, here's how to get to this insight, here's how to solve this problem. So I'd really recommend those. I think they're really fantastic. Obviously, I'm biased, but yeah, I'd say that's really our mission, is trying to help people realize that location data is special, and it's a bit different to work with to sort of traditional data. I mean, I guess traditional data isn't really a thing, but non-spatial data, it does have some additional things you need to be aware of, but it's really not scary. And it's really, once you get your head around it, and honestly, the things about location data that are different are things that we all probably became aware of in school when we were like 14. It's things like geometry and
Right.
where things sit in the world in reference to each other. And once you sort of get your head around those, or realize those are things you need to think about, then you're sort of away.
So you mentioned the academy, I believe, that CARTO
Mhm.
has. This sounds like something that I'd like to link to in the show notes. Uh, um, I think making folks aware of what's out there from an educational perspective and how they can use tools like this and dive in. And, it's one thing to kind of talk about the work that we've done as professionals, but I'd really like to share with them the link to that, just so that they can see how, some examples of how they can go out and use this. Do you have folks that reach out to you like on LinkedIn and like ask you, hey, how do I get started in GIS? And I guess what kind of questions do people ask you?
Yeah, I do quite a lot, to be honest.
Oh,
Quite
really?
a Yeah, I really do quite a lot. I get a real range of questions. I think the ones that are hardest to answer are the ones that are sort of very, very broad, and are sort of, I want to work in GIS.
Right.
What do I do? And those are sort of like, because GIS is actually
Yeah.
like, in a way, in terms of the whole data industry, GIS is quite niche, but actually GIS is a very broad. There are people doing
Okay.
things that almost are nothing like each other in the GIS industry. It's a very broad industry, people doing loads of different things. So advising people on a general GIS career is very difficult. But
Right.
generally, yeah, I do get quite a lot of people asking questions about more specific things, more specific. People often, for example, ask me, what type of coding language should I learn?
Mhm.
That's one of the really frequent questions I get. And it's always, you need to think about what you actually want to be doing, what sort of analysis you want to be doing. Like I, for example, the first coding language I learned was R, just because I really wanted to learn how to create something called a joy plot, which is basically a series of stacked line graphs that show elevation. So it looks like a 3D relief model. And I stumbled across a great tutorial that showed you how to do that in R. And that's how I sort of got into that. And you sort of, sometimes you can fall into things just because you wanted to do something really specific, and then you learn that it's great. So that's a question I get really often, and I think people need, a really important thing to think about is what you want to be doing. But generally, yeah, I get loads of questions about what sort of resources should I be looking at to try and do something like this or expand my skills in this sort of area. And I'd say in geospatial, resources can be quite sort of software specific, because software can be very niche and do quite different things. So if you wanted, for example, use CARTO, you wouldn't want to learn through doing something like QGIS just because they're so different. But I would generally suggest to people, like, look on YouTube, Google like specific things that you want to learn to do, because so many people have amazing blogs out there. Like, I mean, I'm not going to blow my own trumpet and say mine's amazing, but I have a blog that has lots of tutorials on it.
Okay.
And lots of people do. And I would say, like, the best thing about the geospatial industry, and I'd say probably the wider data industry, is people are so forthcoming with knowledge.
Yes.
Like, people
Agree.
don't sort of
Completely.
learn how to do something and then shut the drawbridge behind them. People are so
Right.
forthcoming. They'll make a YouTube video, they'll start a blog, they'll post their code on Twitter, just saying, like, here's how I did this, because they want you to be able to do it, because then you might be able to like unlock the next step, and then that will help them in the future, which is really fantastic. So there's such a huge array of resources out there.
So if I could summarize that, the first thing is, individuals, if they're looking to get into doing this kind of thing, they should explore kind of what the different sub areas are within the field, see what interests them, and then kind of do some searching on who are the experts or thought leaders in that pocket, and get some ideas on what the tools are that they're using. And then maybe as a last step, it's then you start to look into how can you learn some of those tools that's needed to do the work. So it's almost working backwards rather than starting with the tool. Did I summarize that right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you did really well. And I think just on that and on the tools, I think it can be, like, I think with a lot of very technical jobs, sometimes you'll look at a job description
For
and
sure.
you'll see like
Yeah.
20 different tools listed and
Yeah.
say you need to know all of these. And I think that's quite unfair of people posting job descriptions, because
Right.
A, how are you supposed to be an expert in 20 different things? And B, if you know Python, then you can learn R. Like, you've got that capability, you've got that way of thinking. So I don't think people should always get so caught up in being able to learn really, and organizations as well, I don't think should be really caught up in expecting individuals to know really specific software or really specific tools. It's about your sort of general ability to pick those things up and know the lingo. And I often say to people, as they're sort of getting started in geospatial, one of the most important things to be able to do is know what to Google, know what to search for, because you will spend so much time having to do that. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I give similar advice just for folks that reach out, with advice on how to get into the analytics field in general. And it's the same challenges, sometimes there's these broad questions of, hey, how do I transition from my current field into analytics?
Yeah.
And it's the same type of process like you described. It's kind of like, well, okay, like what do you want to do? Would you like to do, some sort of data analysis in your current industry at your current company, or do you want to go into, something totally different and into a totally different industry? And so that you kind of do have to whittle it down to, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then, start small. To your point, don't try to learn all of these tools. Start with, apply the 80-20 rule, and, what are the tools that people are using to be an analyst in the industry, or, type of company that you want to go into, and then learn a couple of those and get good at those. And I always think if you can add value in your company, in your current role, there's nothing prohibiting you from trying these tools to, improve the insight that you're providing through the scope of your current role. I mean, that's I think sometimes a great segue to get noticed as an analyst, and move into a role that interests you more. And I would think the same would be true for those that are interested in mapping.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I actually think my career and my sort of passion for geospatial really completely changed course when I started doing that. And when I stopped just sort of always doing things by the book and always using the same tools we always did, but actually started trying out new things.
Right.
And it's difficult when, so I used to work in consultancy, and in consultancy you have timesheets and you have to do a certain amount of billable work. So
Mm,
sometimes you don't necessarily have the time to be innovating or trying to do cool things. You just have to sort of do what you can do in the time that you have given. But we also had, the company I was at had like an innovation club. We would do a lot of proposals. So there was space to try and do those slightly more exciting things and try and push the boundary. So I totally agree. It's really good to make what you can with what you have and use
right.
that as a springboard and a platform.
For sure. Agreed. Yeah. And switching gears a little bit here to, if someone's listening that's a leader in an organization and they, you know, want to they're interested in GIS, they're interested in leveraging the capabilities. They also want to know kind of where is it going? Where are, you mentioned we start kind of learning about maps in grade school and now we've got all these modern tools, but some of the same principles apply. Where is the field going? Where do you see some of the biggest opportunities being in the next, few years, 5 years out, et cetera?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel it's something that is being so hotly debated in the industry at the moment. There's people saying that in 5 years there will be no more GIS analysts. GIS will be dead.
Oh,
That it
really?
won't sort of exist. Yeah, there's definitely a big school of thought that think that geospatial will be completely embedded within data science or data analytics, and it won't sort of be its own field. I think it's really difficult to sort of predict the future of an industry that's so broad. So you have this sort of data science area, you have a sort of developer area, which are often quite overlapping. You have a lot of analyst areas, you have an almost graphic design area, like a cartography area. It's really, really broad. And I think they'll all sort of go in their own directions. The area that I sort of align myself most closely with is sort of data science and data analysis and data visualization. I definitely see there becoming much more overlap with more non-spatial data science and much more integration between the two there. So a lot more sort of dashboarding work, a lot more integration between different types of data visualizations, rather than traditionally the GIS analyst would make a map, print it to PDF, send it off, and that would be it. I'm seeing a lot more integration between the two. I think we'll be seeing a much greater move to cloud native. I think CARTO's been quite quick off the mark with that, but I think, big data's been a buzzword for such a long time now, but I don't see it going away. I only see data getting bigger and people wanting more insights from bigger data. And I think cloud native is really the only way to go with that. So I'm definitely seeing more people moving to the cloud, getting off their servers, getting off their local machines and going that way. And I also think this thing we've talked about quite a lot in this podcast is this democratization of analysis as well. So people being able to get more insights from the data themselves, even if they don't necessarily have the data science skills to be able to extract that themselves, being able to access these dashboards and these web maps so they can make the decisions themselves. I think it's all about closing the gap between the data and the user, and us as the sort of middleman, the analysts and the visualizers, sort of doing what we can to bring those two things closer together.
That's a good point. And going along the last part that you said there, kind of as we close the conversation here, I'm curious, is that where do you see that fitting into, these advocacy roles that are emerging with tech companies like the one you have? Is that something that, you feel responsibility to help close, or what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely hope that organizations do take up more of these advocacy roles. I think it's something
Hmm.
that's quite new. You've seen a lot of tech companies they tend to call it evangelizers, which is a
Right.
very similar role.
Yeah.
CARTO, we talked about that, and we felt like that was maybe too religious a name for the job title that I had. Also, you get sort of they're called them like dev communicators, like dev comms roles. So they've been around in tech for quite a while, and hopefully more data companies and software companies and geospatial companies will start to, I think, take up these roles, because I personally, I mean, I'm obviously very biased because this is how I pay my rent, but I think they're so valuable because it's really great to have people who really understand the pain points and the aspirations of customers, because they would have been customers. So before I joined CARTO, I was exactly the kind of person who CARTO would have been targeting. So having people in a marketing team communicating with the sales team, but also talking to the people creating products and sourcing data who have that sort of understanding, I think is really, really helpful. But I also think it's great to, as a user, to be able to look at marketing material from a company and be like, oh, they really know, they understand what I'm talking about. It's not just like a SEO grab. They're really trying to help me understand my product, get the most out of it, which I think is something that's so important. Is we at CARTO, we really want people to feel like they're getting so much out of our product, and that's partly what I'm here for, is to say, have you tried this? Have you thought about doing this? So yeah, I really hope it's something that we see a lot more of, just because I think it's a great role for me personally. I absolutely love it, and I think it's really valuable for companies and for customers as well.
For sure. And on the end of the value for companies and customers, what kind of a closing question is what, so if you think about your average company or customer that's, average company, not a customer, we'll put it that way. Average company that's out there that's not leveraging modern GIS capabilities, what's one or two things they might be missing out on that they might want to be thinking about?
Oh, so much, Dustin. I don't know how to finish this as a closing question. So at CARTO, one of the things we often say is you can't understand why without thinking about where. So often the geography of a location is what is driving what's happening at that location. It could be there are natural barriers. It could be there's a lack of services. It could be there's really bad air quality. Like, there's so many factors that could be driving why something's happening, that you could be looking at like bar chart after bar chart and reading report after report. And sometimes if you just put those things on a map or did a quick bit of like spatial regression analysis, you'd be able to look at it and say, oh, it's that's the cause. And it's so often it's such a key factor in why something's happening. So I think part of it is just, it's a crucial part of the puzzle, but I think part of it is, it's also so concise. Like I, going back to the example I just came up with, you might need 20 bar charts to show something that one
Right.
map shows. You might need a whole chapter in a report to show something that one map shows. And I think sort of circling back to what we were talking about right at the start of this podcast.
Yep. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, there's also
Come full circle.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. There's also this real engagement, emotive element that maps have, where you put something on a map and people really care about it, or you show someone a web map and they immediately scroll into their local area, see what's happening at their local area, believe it, and they say, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then they immediately believe the whole data visualization. I think sometimes people can be mistrustful of data visualization, so with a map, you can really ground it in reality. So yeah, you get that engagement, that emotive element of it as well. Just to end full circle on your podcast.
No, I totally
We didn't
agree.
even do that on purpose. We didn't even plan that.
It ties perfectly to what we were talking about at the beginning, in the much more primitive, maps that I've built within the organizations that I've been in, it does really, they really change the conversation. They change the game. I mean, you can take a look at a data set, that a company has been using for years, and you put that data into a map, and it just it creates this level of personalization, between individuals and the data that didn't exist previously, and the engagement goes way up as a result of that. So I really like the examples that you gave, and I would confirm that from the primitive examples that I've created, that has been exactly what's happened. So Very cool. I really enjoyed this topic. I think I could dig into some of these resources that you shared for probably 2 days. I might have lost about 16 hours worth of my time here. But we'll
I
put
can
links
only
in the
apologize.
we'll put links in the show notes for sure. How can individuals follow the work that you do?
So you can find me on Twitter at Helen Makes Maps. I've also got a website that's helenmakesmaps.com. Or if
Okay.
you're more of a LinkedIn person, Helen McKenzie. I'm the ginger woman who works for CARTO.
Okay. All right. So we'll put links to those profiles as well in the show notes. And really appreciate you coming on. This was such a fun conversation, and I think really impactful, capabilities for folks to think about using in their organization. So thanks for taking the time to do this.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've so enjoyed it. Thank you for letting me talk about maps for the last half hour. I absolutely loved it.
Yes, for sure. All right. So be sure to check out all the links that we're going to put from some of the things we talked about in the show notes, and we'll see you back next week.